Ladies and gentlemen, what is up and welcome to today's video where I wanted to have a little bit of a chat about kind of going for 5-star featured champions or the 5-star featured crystals in Marvel Contest of Champions, and give kind of my best possible advice to players that are looking to kind of build a very solid roster to tackle all of the challenges that Marvel Contest of Champions is going to throw at you. Because I know some people are of this mindset that, you know, they just want to go for like any 5-star champion because they really like the character, and that's fine. But this advice again is, if you want to do your own thing, that's absolutely fine. But just to make clear that this video is kind of my personal advice and suggestions on how to build like a really strong endgame roster, so that you can tackle all of the content and have an amount of options available to you for all the new challenges that appear in the game. So yeah, with that in mind, my biggest piece of advice, and this is a mistake that I myself are 100% guilty. I made this mistake earlier in January, and that is going for a champion on the first day of its release. Such a terrible mistake to make, because going for a champion on the initial day of its release, the larger majority of the time, you know, there's been no solid gameplay of that champion and no point of reference, so you can't really put it on a scale and, you know, figure out exactly how good that champion is on the release day. And I made this mistake when it came to opening the Cable Crystal. That was the second ever featured 5-star crystal I did, and I got Cable, and then I used my Awakening Gem for him on Labyrinth. And in hindsight, that was a really big mistake for my roster, because if I'd used the theoretically speaking, granted this might not have been the actual scenario that occurred, but theoretically speaking, if I had held out and waited and been a little bit more patient, I could have waited for Archangel and then got a 5-star Archangel and then awakened him with the same resources. So, you know, that would put me in a significantly better position than I am now. Granted, I'm certainly not complaining about my position. I have a fantastic roster, but just as an example of a decision that I could have made in the past that would have benefited me significantly better than the decision I actually made. So yeah, I rushed way too quickly into Cable. I was really on the pre-hype for the character, and I learned a very valuable lesson about kind of overhyping a character and kind of building him up a little bit too much in my head in comparison to what the character actually turned out to be. And Cable is an alright champion, but simultaneously I'm of this philosophy that it takes so long to get kind of 15k shards, and you know, the gamble, like it's very rough in terms of like getting, you know, actually landing on that champion in a featured 5-star crystal. It's very speculated to be between a 20 to 25% drop rate. If you watch a lot of the MCOC mod videos done, it was probably about a year and a bit ago now, but there was a point where he was, you know, 5-stars are fairly new, and he was opening like, you know, he's on his mod server, he was opening like batches of 50 5-star featured hero crystals, and a lot of the time it turns out there are about 12, 13 out of the 50 turned out to be the featured champion. So it's roughly like 20-25%, or kind of around that figure. So kind of that's the rough luck that you need to kind of expect to get a champion. It's roughly a 1 in 4, 1 in 5. So that is kind of the additional advantage as well for going for a featured crystal, because it gives you that 20 to 25% chance to get the specific champion that you are after. And especially with the basic pool growing and more kind of like a lot of like well, champions that I rank between kind of the amazing and demigod tier being added to the basic pool, I think, you know, in terms of like building the strongest and best possible roster, you want to only be looking ideally at the god tier champions, or, you know, or champions that I define as god tier. You know, you can have your own definition if you slightly disagree with rankings, but you know, the importance of kind of understanding like a champion's value and making sure you're going for a really good champion. Because one of the things that I see, it's especially a young kind of newer players and sometimes younger players, is they'll go for a 5-star on the very first day. Like I saw it with like Nebula, I've seen it with Carnage, Punisher as well, and then a few hours into playing that 5-star, they are just absolutely gutted because they realize they've got a champion that is going to be, you know, relatively worthless or nowhere near up to the expectation that they kind of, you know, what they expected of the character. So yeah, that's just kind of my biggest piece of advice, is just chill when it comes to new 5-stars being released. Kind of wait, you know, if you are going to go for it on the initial cycle, because 5-stars, the cycle is that they get released for a week when the champion comes into arena, and then there's like, I think it's a 4-month break now because they slightly altered the time period, and then about 4 months after, then they are available again as a 5-star in the featured hero crystal for 2 weeks, and then after that they're going to be added into the basic pool, but that's a bit of an odd schedule that is kind of continually coming around. So most champions that are being released this year, you know, are going to be in the basic pool by kind of March next year. So that's interesting to bear in mind, but there's a lot of good information on pages like Marvel Contest of Champions Tricos if you're looking for that kind of stuff. So yeah, in terms of like, you know, which champion should you go for? I think for the first, I don't think, like, I've sat and thought about this for a while, and I don't think there is a bad time ever. I don't think anywhere's too early to start going for the gamble for a god tier champion. Like, if it is an absolutely game-changing champion, and I think because, you know, we got this character coming up, I'm going to use Stark Enhanced Spider-Man as the perfect example for this. You know, even unawakened Stark Enhanced Spider-Man is definitely in the top 5 hardest hitting characters in the entire game. So, you know, if you are a progressing player and you pick up, you know, Stark Enhanced Spider-Man from the featured hero crystal, then, you know, you can, even unawakened, you can take that character straight up to rank 4 with the resources that you can get via 100% completing Act 4, and then you can use Stark Enhanced Spider-Man to get quite an easy initial clear in the Labyrinth of Legends, which again will allow you to get a second rank 4 5-star champion, plus a load of upgrade materials and stuff like that. So, you know, going for the right champion straight off the bat is definitely something to consider. And I think, you know, for your first champion, that's something you should be looking at, is the ability to potentially clear Labyrinth of Legends, unless you're set on doing it with a character like a 4-star 550 Star-Lord, which is a little bit more expensive. But generally, if you can pick up kind of a god tier damage dealer, that's gonna do some pretty good stuff there. And then, you know, in terms of like evaluating new characters and stuff, I think what, you know, you've always got to reference them to kind of existing options in the game and stuff that's in the pool. So, you know, if we're looking at characters like going for potentially Angela as a 5-star, granted she's already out of the crystal, but Angela, you know, is worse than Hyperion, significantly worse in terms of damage than Stark Enhanced Spider-Man, and also lacks the additional utility with the evade and power drain. And what else does Stark Enhanced Spider-Man have? And also the taunt mechanic. So yeah, I mean, if you know, draw comparisons between those two characters, I believe most people will arrive at the conclusion that Stark Enhanced Spider-Man is by far the better option. And same with characters like kind of Yondu. Yondu, in my opinion, I think he's just about demigod tier. Like, he's got a lot going on for him, but simultaneously, I don't really see many scenarios where you would want to play a Yondu over a Stark Enhanced Spider-Man. Granted, he does have some good stuff with his heal block and power reduction mechanics, but he's still not quite there. Like, he's a demigod character. I think, you know, if you got him out of a 10k crystal, you'd be pretty chuffed with that. But, you know, the 15k gamble is a very, very expensive one, so it's definitely something to kind of consider and keep in mind with that. So yeah, in terms of like the upcoming champions, and we'll just kind of go over to this list, the only ones that I kind of think are worth going for is really just Stark Enhanced Spider-Man, to be honest, unless maybe if you have a Cosmic Awakening gem. Just looking at some of the initial Medusa gameplay, Medusa looks like she's a very similar rank to Angela, but Medusa also does rely on being awakened. So yeah, I wouldn't, you know, we're looking at Medusa. A lot of people have been asking me, especially having free 5-star Cosmic Awakening gems, are you gonna go for Medusa Seatin? And again, I just looked at the Stark Enhanced Spider-Man, and I'm like, it's just such a better character comparatively speaking. So yeah, I don't think I'm gonna go for a 5-star Medusa there. And then also, what is it? Vulture, Green Goblin, both very, very underwhelming champions. I don't think either of those are worth a 5-star featured, but simultaneously, I think Green Goblin would be okay to pull when he's in the 10k ones, and Vulture, not really on that Vulture hype. Vulture was an incredibly underwhelming character in my opinion. And then we also have what is it, Dr. Octopus. Dr. Octopus, his power control stuff is interesting. I place him in my demigod tier in terms of rankings. I don't think he's up there, though. I don't think he's up there. I'm very much of the belief now, you know, if you want to go for a 5-star featured champion, in your eyes, or, you know, in your eyes, it needs to be a god tier champion. It needs to be so good that it kind of justifies the additional gamble, which is incredibly expensive. And then next up we have, what is it, Kingpin. Kingpin, not worth it as a 5-star. I know a lot of people as well that made the similar mistake that we were talking about earlier, about jumping the gun on Kingpin, and then kind of after a couple of days figuring out he is actually a really, really easy champion to fight. You just got to bait the special one, and then yeah, it's just not even a challenge. And in terms of his offensive output, very, very lacking. If we compare him to, you know, like Gwenpool and a few of the other skill characters. So yeah, Kingpin, bit of a disappointment in my opinion, but that is kind of the main thing. If you take anything away from this video, it's basically wait to see if a champion is good before you open the 5-star crystal, because it just, oh man, it pains me when people open it day one, just immediately as soon as it comes out, and then like 5 minutes later they're messaging me being like, is this champion any good? And at that time I didn't really know, and then a few days later it comes out that, you know, in comparison to what other champions can do of a similar class or a similar play style, that champion just straight up sucks. So yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, hopefully this video was informative and you learned a little bit more about kind of my decision process when it comes to deciding which 5-star featured champions I'm going to gamble for. If you did enjoy the video, feel free to smash that like button. That'd be greatly appreciated. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching. Take care and have an absolutely fantastic day.